You're on Long Final, Ireland's aviation podcast from Squawk 7000.
So I'm Michéal Sheridan. I'm the Chief Executive at the Irish Community Air Ambulance Charity.
Michéal, the idea of a charity-operated air ambulance, how has that come about in Ireland?
Yeah, so it actually came out of an original service that was ground-based in West Cork, and that grew out into organisations like West Cork and East Cork Rapid Response, and also, for your listeners on the East Coast, Wicklow Rapid Response. And then I suppose really just some people got together and realised that as a country, Ireland really had an underdeveloped HEM service. So 13 years ago, government established a base in Athlone, which is obviously operated by the Air Corps. But for the rest of the country, really, there was nothing. And particularly, it was identified that the southwest, this part of the world really, so Cork, Kerry, even up as far as Clare, were underserved, very remote, very rural areas. Difficulties sometimes even getting ground ambulances into locations because of the remote nature of some of the incidents. So really from that, I suppose the discussion started about 5 years ago about establishing a charity-funded air ambulance service. And then we went live here in July 2019, so operational now about 23 months.
And if we do a comparison between Ireland and the UK in the operation of helicopters and their availability, what are we looking at?
So what you're looking at really, I suppose, is a really good example of a country that has a very developed service would be Wales. So Wales is a population of 3.2 million people, very similar geographically. Now a little bit more mountainous, obviously, than Ireland. But Wales has 4 helicopters. So a helicopter for every 800,000 people. Even the north of Ireland, population of about 1.2 million, and they currently have 1 air ambulance service up and running. And Ireland has 1 charity-funded air ambulance for a population of 5 million. So you can see straight away where the gap is. So even in the UK, it's 1.5, 1.6 million people per heli. So the area we do cover here, which is primarily Munster at the moment, we are covering an area of 25,000 square kilometres, and there is a population of about 1.4 million people within that. So for our 1 helicopter, we're close to the others, but the challenge really is, I suppose, the opportunities that lie in the future for us and for other organisations potentially around looking at the HEMS network nationally and seeing the part that we can play in ensuring that Ireland is as good as Wales, Scotland, England and further afield.
I'm just thinking about the idea, though, that the National Ambulance Centre are more than happy to work with you. It's not a question of anybody stepping on anybody's toes. But what's the reluctance to have more?
I don't know. I just think it's because maybe it's relatively new. So if you think about the fact that the Air Corps service in Athlone was established in 13 years ago, and really was providing a service to the country from the central point. But one of the challenges you have now is with increased populations, people are moving faster. So then you're looking at increased trauma. And if you have a single helicopter based in the centre of the country that's tasked to the west coast or the northwest coast, and something happens somebody somewhere else in the country, probably within this region, the answer then is, the question I suppose is why should people in this part of the country not have equity of service in terms of being able to access an air ambulance. And really the difference, I suppose, is what we talk to people about is the big difference that helicopters offer is twofold. One is getting crew there very quickly. In a lot of cases, ground crew are there, the National Ambulance Service ground crew are there before anybody else. But I think it's really as well about making sure that if there's a need for somebody to be transferred to hospital, to the best hospital, then it's really about having a helicopter available.
And some people might even have the idea, sure, it's a bit of a notion to have a helicopter. We're only a small country. Can you give me some of the numbers of actually how your team have been tasked? It probably put it in context.
Yeah, so we're actually not far. Probably in May of this year, we'll have been tasked 1,000 times. So last year, which is our first full year in operation, we were tasked just under 500 times. And what we know in terms of the types of taskings, the main taskings we're getting, and we got last year, were to road traffic collisions, followed by cardiac arrest, and then medical conditions that we would classify as cardiovascular. So chest pain, heart attack, so a STEMI heart attack, stroke, and then right down to things like farming accidents. So about This year in particular, about 15% of our taskings so far have been to farm-related accidents. So what we see is, when we look at our heat maps in terms of our taskings for last year, very much in rural, remote areas, very much out to West Kerry, West Cork, right down along the coast of West Clare, over as far as Dungarvan. Our furthest tasking last year was to Clifton. And sometimes what can happen, and it happened us earlier this year, it can happen that the Air Corps are fog-bound in Athlone. So earlier this year, for example, we would have gotten a tasking from here to Clifton for a farmer who had been involved in a farming-related accident. And what is happening is, as the call is coming in from that location, maybe a wife or a partner or a family member is ringing, the call centre, NAC, who are part of NEOC in the National Ambulance Service, they're starting to realise that potentially this needs not only urgent care on scene, but also is likely to need transfer to hospital. So in that situation, the crew left here, flew to Clifton, worked with the ground crew from National Ambulance Service, stabilised the patient, and then transferred the patient to Galway by air.
Are we likely to get to a kind of a junction, though, where somebody will make the call saying this actually should be a national service provided, or they'll look at the UK and say, well, actually, the charity-based version works as well?
Yeah, so clearly in the UK, and right across the UK, so Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, all of the HEMS air ambulance services in those locations are charity funded. In Ireland currently, what we would have is, in the HEMS space, let's call it, we have Air Corps and we have ourselves. And then obviously when you look at the wider availability of assets, you obviously have CHC as well, in relation to Coast Guard duties. So, I think one of the things that we are asking for is that somebody actually needs to take Ireland, take the available resources, and look at how best everybody. I always liken it to a rugby team. The CHC, Air Corps are front row, big, strong, able to take on different sort of weather conditions, go further, and are stronger. We're in Munster, so we would liken ourselves to a Peter Stringer, where we're a little bit more nimble, we're very agile, we're off the ground in under 4 minutes, and we can land in the back garden of a house because of the size of our aircraft. So, I do think that as a country, and as I said earlier on, there's a little bit more development to be done, but I do think what needs to happen is somebody actually needs to look at the country as a whole, look at all of our needs, be it offshore, be it search and rescue, be it EAS and HEMS, and look to see, well, what is the best way to do that? And also then, who are the best people to do that? And if we're judged as being the best people to be involved in HEMS and EAS, then that's something we'll step up to do. It will require, obviously, further investment in terms of funding, but it's something we're ready to do. And we do have ambition here that nobody in Ireland will be more than 30 minutes from an air ambulance service. If that's us doing that, or if that's part of a system, then we as citizens, and me as a dad and as a son of parents who live in a rural area, if that means that the state steps up to do it and we end up stepping back, then isn't that a great result for the country? But at this moment in time, we're doing what we're doing it really well. We're being tasked significantly. We know too that we offer really good value for money to our donors. So our annual cost to run the service, the helicopter service alone, apart from our ground services, our vehicles, is about 1.55 million. So that works out at an average cost of about €3,500 per tasking. Now, we know nobody can compete with that. So, that's the argument as well for having charity involved, is we do offer a level of agility and ability to respond quickly and move very fast.
Where do you get that money from then?
Donors, very generous individuals who every month give us some money on a regular basis. So they're what we call our friends. We have people who have taken part in events like Marching Through March or 100K Your Way in May. We have companies as well who've been involved in supporting us. So really, if you think about fundraising, now, apart from COVID, if you think about fundraising, we're looking at securing support from philanthropy, from corporate donors, working with corporate partners, the general public, whether they're hiking or cycling or they are making regular monthly donations. It's really just that, what we would call our fundraising mix. And again, one of the things that we are looking to do and to work with some organisations on is, we know that we're flying a lot to remote rural parts of certainly the southwest coast. We also know there are a lot of people overseas who've been successful, who may have family still living in those areas. So again, we're having some conversations with some organisations about reaching out to diaspora and seeing what might be possible. But purely through, I suppose it's the answer to your question is fundraising in the same way as any charity would be fundraising. We would be exactly the same.
But it's also a small percentage of the amount of money that is actually in circulation for charity, and so you have to stake your claim.
We do, and the problem is we talk about this all the time in the charity sphere. Is there's a pot of X size, and we really have two choices. We can either fight for the same amount of the pot, and as more charities come on board and as newer charities are created, then clearly our share of the pot gets smaller. The other opportunity we have is to work together collectively to make the pot bigger. And that's really what we would be looking to do. The challenge that we have here, I suppose, and also the exciting opportunity, this organisation probably in its very early days was more like a social enterprise, and it grew out of that model. What we're now looking to do, obviously, is to build out more like a charity model, and what we really want to become genuinely is one of the charities of choice. And we see that from the UK and particularly Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Their air ambulance charities are almost, in their top 3, 4, 5, because they realise that any day you could have an incident or an accident and you pick up the phone and ring 999, there's every possibility that there could be an air ambulance landing in your back garden or on the road beside where you've crashed your car.
If you think about the future of this, then what's the vision or the image that you're working towards?
Yeah, so while we're Irish Community Air Ambulance, really we at this moment in time we're looking at 2 or 3 different component parts of that. One is the helicopter service, so the air service, and the other side of that as well as our ground service. So we're probably not very well known for the fact that we would have what we would call our rapid response vehicles on the ground in certain parts of the country. We actually have 4 in Dublin. We have one doctor in Dublin who in the last 3 months has been tasked 100 times and has also been carrying out minor surgical roadside procedures to stabilise a patient maybe who's been involved in a very serious RTC. We have one in Donnagh, we have one in Mayo, we have one in Cork and also in Kilkenny and in Offaly. And what we want to do is to make that ground service more visible. Really for us, we're part of a system. When we're tasked, our helicopter becomes part of the response. So we become an asset to the National Ambulance Service. You'll be speaking to Donnagh, our pilot. Donnagh obviously is part of the team here, but the crew in the back, the medical crew, are National Ambulance Service. And really, obviously, they couldn't fly without us, and we couldn't get the care to people without them. So
some people will be interested in a new helicopter coming?
Yes. Now, I won't pretend to be an expert in helicopters, but we currently have 2 109 e-powers. They're Leonardo or Augusta Westland. In late May, we're taking delivery of a 109S. And I suppose it's really exciting for us. The first thing is actually, what will be very different is it will carry its own branding, which will sort of be the impetus for us to start to develop all of our other branding out of that. So everything will be connected. So in time, when people see a very bright red and yellow helicopter in the sky, or landing close to their home or in their local town or village, that they'll start to recognise that as us. It gives us the opportunity to actually start looking at, could we play a role in training people? So in UCC at the moment, there's a new programme for critical care paramedics. Part of the module of their training is a requirement that they have some aeromedical experience. So that the larger cabin in the back will actually give us that opportunity. It also potentially means the crew can bring a little bit more equipment on board as well if needed. So it's just really exciting for us. It's really a fresh start. It will reflect our new colouring, our new branding, and then obviously in terms of its capabilities to fly further, faster, which is really what we've been talking to people about. It's just an exciting time.
My name is Donnagh Verling. I'm the pilot with the air ambulance base down here in Rathcoole in County Cork. We're currently sitting in the back of our duty aircraft for today, GE Rescue. So it's a G-Reg 109E, which is what we're using at the moment. Company is, as a result of Brexit, we're transitioning from Sloan UK to Sloan Ireland. We're currently in the process of applying for an AOC. So it'll be a fully Irish company operating down here with the the Irish Community Air Ambulance.
People will be very interested in the specs of the machine in terms of how you operate it, speed-wise and stuff, and even the distances that you can cover. And why this location?
The original plan, so that there's already an air ambulance based in Athlone. It's operated by the Irish Air Corps. And I suppose geographically, the original idea behind that one was that it's the middle of the country. So someone took a pin, stuck it in the middle of the country and decided there's one air ambulance, so its maximum reach is from that geographical location. The setup down here, when it was initially fundraised and mooted, John Carney, who would have been kind of the founder of the Irish Community Rapid Response, the forerunner to the Community Air Ambulance, he's from down this part of the world, and the need was identified down here. So this is where they did most of their fundraising. This is where they did a lot of their initial setup with West Cork Rapid Response. So they had a network of doctors and cars and stuff, and they saw the requirements and the opportunity was there for them to set up an air ambulance. So I think the original plan was that it would be based in Cork Airport, or that would have been some of the initial thinking that it might be based in Cork Airport. But obviously this was all pre-COVID, and the idea of, well, first of all, Cork is very much susceptible to fog. So for a VFR operation, which what it was going to be, that would have affected maybe the availability of the aircraft. Like you can have a beautiful gin clear day down in Bishopstown in Cork, and it's IFR up in Cork Airport. It's in the clouds. So in the course of, and there was also the cost factor, like to have an air ambulance operation within a major international airport, which Cork was at the time. So they looked around, and by happenstance, they came across, they ended up here. Now, I don't know exactly what the relationship or how it came about, but Rathcoole, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's just outside Mill Street in County Cork. So geographically, as it has turned out, it's a perfect location for an air ambulance. Now, when I say it's perfect, there are obviously shortcomings in that we're not co-located with a hospital. So the ideal would be for any air ambulance that if you can be co-located with a hospital or in a hospital location, that's obviously the better option. But Ireland isn't really set up for that at the moment. But in terms of our ability to reach casualties or call-outs from within our area of operation, we're ideally suited. We're like almost equidistant between Tralee Hospital, Limerick Hospital and Cork Hospital.
It's a single pilot operation for you then. So what are some of the particular challenges you face taking this machine, to the side of a road, to a farm field?
Yeah, I mean, it is a single pilot operation with the addition of a TCM, so the technical crew members. So the normal setup for us is a 3-person crew. So there's a pilot, there is the lead medical personnel from the National Ambulance Service, who was always an advanced paramedic, and then there's the second National Ambulance Service personnel, who is either an emergency medical technician or an advanced paramedic as well. So that the medical fit that those guys have is one setup, but all of them then have also been received an element of aviation training. So there's an EASA recognition for the qualification of TCM, or technical crew member. So there's laid down criteria for what they have to do, what qualifications they have to hold on to. So they do things like dangerous goods, they do air law, they do a bit of communication, they get courses in navigation, and they are basically there to act as I suppose you'd say a very junior co-pilot. Yeah. So they don't have access to fly the aircraft, but they can do things like read checklists, hand you maps, they assist with the navigation. Another requirement that they have to have CRM training, so they get same CRM training as, let's say, the rest of the flight crew. So when we do our annual CRM training, in line with the EASA requirements for whatever the 3-year rolling CRM criteria. So they do all that as well.
What's your flying story that has you sitting here in the afternoon in the wind in Cork?
Well, back when Pontius was a pilot, I joined the Air Corps in 1989. So I did. When I did it, I joined as a cadet first. So I did my full crawling around in the mud, learning how to
The Curragh.
in the Curragh. Yeah, I did a full 18-month cadetship. Got commissioned as a second lieutenant, and then did my wings course in Donnagh, and I got my Air Corps wings in 1992.
Any classmates' names that people would know?
There's myself and my brother were both in the same class, so there's two Verlings. After that, Paul Paul is in the IAA, Shane Bonner. I mean, you know, they're all still
you're just proving a point for us here at Squawk 7000 is that once a guy has been in that system, there's a lot of his buddies still around in aviation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, all of our guys, like Martin Timmins would have been in Ryanair for a very long time. John Flanagan still in and out of Ryanair. So yeah, there's guys, classmates, and there was 8 in our class. I think we started off with 16 guys in our wings course initially. So we flew the White Marquettis up in Gormeston back in the day. Edited down from 16 down to about 8 in pretty short order. I flew PC-9s for a while, instructed on that, and then back into helicopters again, flying the 135, 139. And then in 2013, I retired and went to Oman, to the Royal Oman Police. Myself and my wife and kids moved out to Oman and we were there for about 6 years. So I was flying and instructing with the Royal Oman Police, which was interesting. It's a beautiful part of the world, yeah. So that was good fun. And then my kids got to sort of school-going age, and we looked at I'm in the unfortunate position that I actually like my family. So we decided my kids were getting to sort of secondary school age as well. So wherever we went to next, we would stay for the kids' kind of secondary school type. So you're talking the age of my kids at the time, you were looking at 8 to 10 years. So we couldn't, while we were very much enjoying our time in the Middle East, and Oman is a very friendly and welcoming country, and I had a great time there, great respect for the people, and the flying was fantastic, and it was good fun. But we couldn't see ourselves staying there for a further 10 years. So it was time to move. Our normal routine is we're on duty here for a 10-hour shift. So when you come in first thing in the morning, you've half an hour of check A on the aircraft, make sure it's doing all the things that it should be doing. That, as I said, it's a check A that the pilot will do, and then you go make yourself a cup of coffee. And on the day that you do the 6 calls, you just about get your first cup of coffee done because you've had it while you're doing the brief. Phone rings nearly before the brief is over, and you go, right, we're off. And then even a short job is nearly a 2-hour one. So once you go 15 minutes away, so a 15-minute flight, once we land, the minimum patient contact that the guys have when you land on scene, it's going to take 15 or 20 minutes for them to assess what's going on with the casualty, what treatment do they need, and start the treatment. And then the more involved ones can go on to 45 minutes, or so they will treat and stabilise the patient on scene first before we put them into the aircraft, obviously.
So my name is Paul Traynor. I'm an advanced paramedic supervisor with the National Ambulance Service, and I'm currently based here at Rathcoole Aerodrome on Helimed92.
Paul, the reason that a helicopter would attend a scene means that you're usually facing fairly challenging cases.
So we can either be facing very significant medical challenges or geographical challenges, or a combination of both. So there's hundreds of 999 calls made to the National Ambulance Service every day, but only a very small number of them would ever flag as requiring a helicopter. So we're looking at stuff like significant road traffic collisions, farming accidents, some of the acute cardiac stuff, patients having heart attacks, cardiac arrests, strokes, and having those very remote from the more suitable hospital.
And I suppose people would think, once upon a time you called an ambulance, the patient was scooped up and brought off as quickly as they could. You actually find yourself treating the person on site first.
Yeah, so 20 years ago or close to it when I started, we were still doing on the ambulance, a lot of scooping people up. Thankfully, we've have a lot more training to third level. We have degrees and masters and stuff like that done, and we have a lot of equipment, medication, and we would aim where possible to try and stabilise a patient at the scene, be that their heart isn't beating. We'll try and restart it. They're not breathing effectively. We'll try and sort that out. They have an airway issue, or they're in severe pain. A lot of the people we go to have very significant musculoskeletal injuries causing pain, so we can try and reduce that, package them appropriately, and at the same time figure out where's the best hospital to take them to.
How's the decision made that you end up attending rather than a land ambulance, for example?
So it's always in combination. It's very seldom that the aircraft would be at a call in isolation. So we're going either in support of a ground crew who have got to a patient first, recognise that their condition is serious enough to warrant the helicopter, or we're being dispatched in tandem with them. So some of the very serious road traffic collisions, it's very obvious to the control centre that this is significant, multiple patients, maybe multiple serious injuries in an area that doesn't have a hospital that can deal with it. So we would get sent at the same time as the ground crews. Sometimes the ground crews get there and go, this isn't as bad as we first thought, you can stand the helicopter down, or more often than not, we will end up landing with them. And sometimes we all come to get there together, sometimes they get there a good bit in front of us, and then we'll decide then. Obviously, we only take one patient in the helicopter, so we'll decide occasionally we've had to call a second helicopter in, or we need to find and triage the patient that's best suited to come with us.
That's an interesting word that you've used there, to just triage somebody. So you're making a decision about what has the most life-threatening injuries or sustainable recovery.
It can be very difficult, certainly in so triage really only comes into effect in multi-casualty. So, for instance, we might be down in Kerry. We might have, just say, make it easy for me, 2 patients in a road traffic collision. One of them has, say, multiple fractures, but they're not life-threatening, and they can be maybe brought to the local hospital in Kerry. The other one might have more significant chest injuries or a head injury that's best suited or their treatment would be best in Cork University Hospital. That's fairly easy. We will take the most critically ill to CUH rather than them going to Tralee.
For people listening, can you describe the environment we're in here at the back of the helicopter? Because it's cosy.
Yeah, it's cosy. Yeah, that's a lot of people say, oh, it's very small. It's very confined. We prefer to call it cosy. It's about the size, a little bit smaller than yours, maybe half the size of your box room at home. On the left-hand side, we have a trolley for one patient. Underneath it, we have multiple oxygen cylinders and some emergency airway equipment. At the head of the stretcher, we have a suction unit, which is, if for anyone that hasn't seen one, when you go to the dentist and they've done some work and they're suctioning the secretions out, and that's what we use for clearing somebody's airway. At the foot of it, mounted up above there, the patient's lower legs, we have our ZOL AED monitor and defibrillator. That's a vital piece of equipment for us. Currently on the stretcher, we have strapped down 3 large bags. One of them is what we call our basic life support bag. We have an advanced life support bag and our drugs bag, which carries all our medication.
And you have packed these and you know everything that's in there.
So every morning, there's an extensive checklist. They all get taken out. Everything is checked. All the drugs, make sure they're in date. All of the equipment that we need, and then they're packed back in. So there's just a crew of 3 on the aircraft. So obviously we have our pilot, Donnagh, and we have an advanced paramedic today, myself, and Ed Walsh, who's an emergency medical technician. So myself and Ed will go through all this in the morning and make sure it's as what we need.
I'm thinking about the situation where you've arrived at a scene, you've stabilised the patient, and they're now in the helicopter heading to the hospital. What can you do in this space?
So the beauty of this aircraft is that the 109, we can get very close to the scene. It has a much smaller footprint, much smaller downdraft than some other aircraft that are used for HEMS. We shut down at every call, so we're never on the ground. You might see some services around the country, around the world, where they're rotors running at the scene, and I've done that, and that works with certain aircraft, but the disc is quite low on this, so we will always shut down. We can do a lot of, we would do 90% of our work, I would say, at the scene with the patient, either in their vehicles, in their homes, in their farmyard, sometimes at the side of the aircraft before we finally load them. So things that we're doing en route, worst case scenario, we're providing ventilation support, so we're actually breathing for the patient using a bag valve mask. Other than that, we're providing ongoing analgesia or pain relief. We're monitoring their vital signs, defibrillate them if their heart was to stop and go into a shockable rhythm if that was required. But I suppose to answer the core of your question, most of the work we do, most of the medical work is done at the scene, and it's just continuity of that while en route. So we would seldom start a new intervention in the back of the aircraft. So there's a lot of thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead, and that only comes with experience.
How did you end up in this job and find yourself sitting here, as said, in an airfield in Cork?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose I'm originally from Kilkenny. My dad was a retained firefighter in Kilkenny for 40 years. He retired as station officer there in Kilkenny. So I grew up around the corner from a very busy retained fire station. So I think there's a bit of smoke in my blood. That's where my graw for the emergency services came. And it, kind of in the early 2000s, so around 2001, 2002, the ambulance services, which were then all individual health board run, were starting to take on lots of people as emergency medical technicians. I went for it. I went for a couple of different places. I got Cork. I said I'd come down here, do the training with a view to going back to Kilkenny. And nearly 20 years later, with 2 different helicopter jobs and a fiancée and 2 kids and 2 on second house and all that. So I'm still in Cork. So I done my advanced paramedic training through UCD in 2006, which was one of the first AP courses that was run. And then in 2013, I started working on Air Corps 112 up in Athlone, which I was on a rotation. So I would do about 10 weeks. I was based in Cork City Ambulance Station at the time. About 10 weeks in Cork City on a ground ambulance, which was my normal job. Then I would rotate to Athlone, do 10 weeks, 4 days on, 4 days off on the helicopter, and then rotate back to, so that went on for 6 years. So that, I was always interested in aviation as I had radio controlled model airplanes. It's a bit of a nerdy thing, but anyway, it was good fun, expensive hobby. And so this was it. I was able to tie work and that interest together. And then my time with the Air Corps really cemented that. It was time after 6 years of being away from home a lot, it was time to stay at home a bit more. And that coincided with the Irish Community Air Ambulance going live. And I got posted here then. So,
what would be your opinion of people learning first aid? For the average man or woman in the street, what should they know?
So first aid, I suppose, is a very broad term. And yes, everybody should learn first aid, preferably as a child, because it's something that will stay with you for life. But if I was to pick one piece of first aid, it's CPR. And if I was to pick one piece of CPR, I would say to be able to recognise cardiac arrest and to be able to do chest compressions. So of all of the, if you go on a first aid course, and they're all very well run by lots of companies, you'll do bandaging and how to deal with a burn and bee stings and all that kind of stuff. Cardiac arrest is life-threatening. Every 24 hours, about 13 or 14 people in Ireland have a sudden out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and currently the survival to discharge from hospital is still less than 10%. So there's a lot of work to be done there. We've had some very significant successes in cardiac arrest patients in this region, but we're only one part of that chain of survival. And the first most important link in the chain of survival is recognising somebody has had a cardiac arrest. And when I say cardiac arrest, I mean they're unconscious, they're not breathing effectively, they've changed colour. So ultimately their heart has stopped, the pump has stopped moving blood and oxygen around their body. And the first chain of survival is recognising that. The next chain is to start chest compressions, call for help, and then there's a chance that we'll be part of that chain of help. But that, learn CPR.
Gets the person into at least the right percentages anyway.
Exactly, yeah. So you're going to pump blood around their body. Without CPR, after about 8 minutes, the oxygen levels will be so low in your body that your brain has taken a hit it's not reversible. So,
do you ever hear from people that you've helped with through the helicopter?
Occasionally, yes. I suppose we would often take an interest, and we're lucky on this aircraft in that we generally only end up in 2 or 3 hospitals. So sometimes we're back in the next day. We might ask how people get on. Well, we would never actively go look to speak to people. If they want to come and speak to us, that's fine. And we've recently had, I suppose, 2 young people, both ladies who have had one a cardiac arrest and one who had a very significant trauma, who, when they seen Irish Community Air Ambulance and seen that how it was set up, and it was a charitable organisation, that they came and said, listen, we'd like to maybe tell our story. And so I've got to meet them, and it's good to see them on their road to recovery. And it can be difficult. I would have seen and done things at their calls that they don't remember. So it's a fine line between helping them move on by coming maybe to the base and seeing the aircraft without maybe adding to
re-traumatizing somebody.
Without adding things in that they didn't know about. So occasionally it's thankfully most, I suppose we don't go to very minor stuff, but a lot of the people that we go to make very good recoveries. Unfortunately, there would be a significant number of people we go to who don't recover and die from either their illness or their injuries. And then there are that small group that'll come back to say hello.
But the importance of the rapid response is really what we're focusing on in this chat.
Yeah, so we're able to get airborne very quickly. Of course, while mentioning that, how the rapid response, there's an invisible element to this team, which is the control centre in Dublin, who are identifying the calls. So we're really reliant on them, and the patients are really reliant on them to be able to sieve through all of the hundreds of calls coming in every day. When they phone us, so the advanced paramedic takes the call, I'll get the general information as to where it is. So they might say, we have a call in Kerry, it's in Dingle. I'll tell the pilot that. He doesn't really need to know a whole lot more than that on what direction we're going in. So he'll check the weather. And then the air code is vital. We'd often just get the air code, then we'll convert that into lat long for the navigation to the scene. And we're averaging 3 to 4 minutes from the phone ringing to wheels up off the pad.
Would you recommend it as a career for somebody listening to us? I'm nearly 20 years at it. I love it. Not every day is enjoyable as but no, overall I find it's been an excellent career for me. I'm very happy with it. It's anybody who comes into the ambulance service now will automatically enter a degree program. So they will leave with a primary science degree after 3 years of full-time work. So you'll be paid while you're working and studying. It can be difficult. It's intense. You can be away from home because you could be posted. You won't necessarily get to the ambulance station that's nearest to where you live. You could be miles away. Generally, most people end up, unlike me, they end up gravitating back to where they came from or where it suits them. Some people, it suits them to stay away. And there's lots of opportunity then to progress, to go do masters, become an advanced paramedic. And then there are specialised units like the helicopter. I mean, there's only probably 15 people in the entire ambulance service operating between the two helicopters between here and Cork and the one in Athlone. But you might be lucky enough to, in time, well, we might have more in time, which might be even better though. Michéal, give us your pitch to get people to donate.
Well, we're the only charity-funded air ambulance in the country. So if people are looking around for an alternative, we know of lots of people who have been on holidays in Cork and Kerry or gone travelling for the weekend for a drive, gone visiting somebody, and they're out of their, when things open up and we're through all of this COVID piece, people are going to be holidaying in West Cork and West Kerry and places like that. If you go for a spin in your car and you're unfortunate enough to be involved in an RTC, the sound that you don't want to hear, but also the sound that would reassure you, is the sound of our helicopter landing. Because if at that point you hear the helicopter, it normally means that you're in a situation where you need that level of care, and what you're more likely needing is, in particularly things like an RTC, or even somebody out walking on the beach in Castle Gregory and they have a cardiac arrest and it's witnessed, then there's a likelihood as well we could get the call. So, for us, I suppose the pitch is very simple. We can operate our service, the air ambulance side of our business, for €1.5 million a year. So for €3,500, we're getting to make the difference for somebody in their life and their family. Now, what can often happen is the outcome isn't the one we want, but what means a lot to the families are that kind of, we threw the kitchen sink at it for them, and the crew next door are really super and experienced at what to do, the National Ambulance Service crew, and they have lived through that traumatic piece in a family home where somebody has died suddenly, and we just wanted to be able to deliver the level of medical care to the scene quickly, that level of compassion and empathy to the scene as well. That's really important, and also without an air ambulance and you're in Killarney and you've had a motorcycling accident, you're an hour from Cork University Hospital. If you've had traumatic injuries that you're required to get there, you're 20 minutes by air. And that 40 minutes in the difference really can be the difference for some people in whether they live or die. You know, so I suppose that's our ask, I suppose.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Long Final from Squawk7000.ie. If you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and do tell your friends.